Post-apocalyptic city setting, demons, big-ass environmental spikes, anime characters. Welcome back, Code Vein. It seems like most action RPGs these days are Souls-like. There's definitely no shortage of this type of video game. Ever since From Software engineered the genre well over a decade ago now, many other developers have tried to cook up their own renditions, and while it's frustrating that most ARPGs are subjected to Souls-like, creating a serious case of I don't know what kind of video game to make, admittedly, every so often a dev that isn't FromSoft manages to make something special. Neo, Lies of P, Code Vein, Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise, or Lords of the Fallen are good examples of Souls-like that built upon the foundations of the genre and added their own flavors to help them stand out. Unfortunately, more garbage than gold usually releases within the genre, creating a sense of exhaustion whenever anyone hears a new Souls-like game is coming out. But I do believe that AI Limit is part of that family of good Souls-likes. I'm surprised how much I enjoyed this video game. This is coming from a brand new China-based studio, Sense Games, and published by CE Asia. It's actually part of PlayStation's China Hero project and has been in development since 2019. Now, the dev sent me a demo of AI Limit in July of last year, and I praised it for having fantastic movement, very reminiscent of Bloodborne. The game almost basically has Bloodborne's quick-step dodge system. The game, just like Bloodborne, also encourages you to be more aggressive in your playstyle, thanks to the core of this game's combat system, the sync gauge. Visually, the game looked nice. It had this dark, gloomy anime aesthetic very similar to Code Vein, and while the actual visuals of the environment seemed to be a little bit bland and uninspired, the actual layout of the levels seemed pretty good, branching pathways and hidden things to find via exploration, just the same way that From Software approaches their areas in their Souls games. Because combat and movement and the general mechanics of the game felt super responsive, this was really impressive. Things were tight here, and it was a great first impressions for a studio's very first video game. And after putting many hours into AI Limit and basically seeing almost everything the game has to offer, I have to say that Sense Games clearly did their homework on what makes a good Souls-like. Now, I should start by saying that this game doesn't necessarily do anything groundbreakingly different with the genre. The only thing that it kind of does a little bit different here is its approach to combat via the sync system, so we should talk about that first. The entire system revolves around this bar here known as the sync gauge. The divided colored portions of the bar represent the current damage threshold that you'll dish out. 100% means that you're going to be dishing out the most damage, whereas if your percent is down the other end, you're going to do less damage. But this gauge also acts as a resource meter. This is the MP system of the game. Just like how Elden Ring has unique abilities for most of the weapons throughout the game, it's the same here with AI Limit. It's a cool system because it makes getting new weapons exciting, as it might have a brand new ability that's really good. So these ability skills require a certain amount of sync in order to pull off. And there's a good number of weapons in this game that have unique abilities. You find weapons out in the world, or via a vendor or an NPC, or by following a quest line. The spell system also requires sync as well. These are your ranged capabilities. While there are some support-based spells that provide some passive buffs, these are mainly your ranged flashy moves. Some of these can be purchased from a vendor using a specific unique currency, or found out in the world, or even some enemies can drop special unique spells on a very low drop rate. Generally, the stronger the weapon skill or spell is, the more sync required in order to use it. Now, landing normal hits actually restores the sync gauge, so there's no real restore MP item, although there kind of is. You're not going between potions all the time, drinking up to ensure that you can perform your abilities, because you're constantly gaining and losing this resource whenever you're engaged in combat. In a way, it's quite reminiscent of Code Vein's iCore system, how there's a built-in mechanic into the core of the combat system in order to restore the resource gauge. But as you take damage, your sync meter will drop, and if you're attacked on 0%, you'll be left stunned for a few seconds, like being hit with 0 stamina in the Souls game. games. And speaking of stamina, there is no stamina gauge in this game at all, so you're free to move those legs or swing that sword to your heart's content. The game revolves around managing your sync gauge, and there's actually two stats in the game that help you build upon improving the usefulness of the sync gauge, known as conversion and stability. Conversion will improve the amount of sync returned after landing a normal hit, and stability will lessen the amount of sync lost upon being hit. Vitality is the main stat that will improve both of these substats, so if you want to build your character into strong focusing this system, you can. The game works just like any other Souls-like. You run around the world defeating enemies and rest at your bonfire, which in this game is known as branches. You'll choose what stats you want to improve, and there are both weapons and spells in the game that require you to be at a specific stat level in order to use. We've also got the typical lettered stat scaling system for all of the weapons. So for instance, if a weapon is S in spirit and you have a high spirit stat, that weapon's going to do more damage. You can also equip 2 weapons at a time, and the game does have a built-in weapon switch combo system, so you can switch to your secondary weapon partway through a combo. Looking at the character progression side of things, there is only 2 armor slots in this game, a main body piece and a headpiece. Weapons can be upgraded to a max level of 10 finding materials out in the world. Seals are a main equipable that can provide additional bonuses to your character, along with determining the usefulness of the sync gauge. This seal that I'm using here introduces more colored bars within the gauge, meaning that I can achieve higher damage thresholds. Each main seal comes with a different number of smaller seal slots. These small seals can be found out in the world and provide smaller passive bonuses like increased resistances to certain attacks or elements. AI Limit actually has a unique approach towards how accumulating spendable currency to level up works and how much of that currency is lost upon death. If you die in this game, there is no means of being able to retrace your steps back to where you died and collect the amount of souls, or in this case crystals, you lost. This all revolves around nucleuses. Each nucleus has a different retention and absorption rate. Retention refers to how many crystals you'll keep upon death, and absorption determines how many crystals you'll acquire upon killing enemies. The energy absorption stat can either be low, medium, or high, and this can further improve how much sync you're getting back after killing enemies. Nucleuses are items acquired after defeating the main bosses throughout the game. These actually work like boss souls, or in Elden Ring's case, remembrances. You have an option here to either use them as a nucleus, or you can take them to an NPC and trade these for unique weapons that relate to the boss you killed. This is a really unique approach to how acquiring the main level up currency of the game works. You get to choose if you want to gain more but lose more, or gain less and lose less. Now, looking at the defensive mechanics of the game, you've got a bit of a choice here as to what best suits your playstyle, and you can choose between these options on the fly, switching in and out. The first one here is a parry system known as Counterspell. If you activate this at the exact frame-perfect moment an enemy attacks, they'll become stunned and they're opened up for a strong fatal attack. These are basically the game's visceral attacks. We also have Thunderstep for all of the dodge enthusiasts. This is the one that I used the most, as I prefer to dodge in my games. This is basically an improved version of dodge, allowing you to perfect dodge. For people that enjoy shields, there is a shield in the game that will block most of the incoming damage. The shield actually absorbs the incoming damage, and after a while it will start to glow purple, which in return you can double tap the block button in order to create an explosion. Or for people that prefer straight up damage builds, there is a system that allows you to damage yourself, but in return enhance all of your attacks. All 4 of these abilities do require a small amount of sync in order to use, not as much as spells or weapon abilities, but again it comes down to managing that sync system. There's only so many of these abilities and systems that you can use before you're forced to have to attack the enemy to rebuild your sync meter. There's a good level of variety when it comes to the combat system of this game, catering to multiple playstyles. Ultimately, the game leans more towards aggressive play, so the game wants you to engage in combat more to do more, but I feel like there is just enough unique flavor here, especially looking at that sync system, mixed in with perfect replication of systems that we've seen time and time again. The moment-to-moment gameplay is fantastic. Movement is fantastic. The feedback and response, dodging, everything is just really good. Now, if we're talking about difficulty, I feel like this game is down the easier end of Souls-likes, which is kind of surprising because when I played the demo that I was given last year, that first boss absolutely ruined me. No! Bro! No! Fuck! Shit! What? What? Bro! Nah. Fuck! Hello! Come on! But this time around, on this final build of the game, it took me 2 attempts to take this thing down, so I'm not sure if the devs actually toned this guy down. Also, shout out to the devs for further improving the HUD. There is a massive difference between the build of the game that I played last year compared to the HUD we have here for the final build. It looks a lot better. But most of the bosses throughout the game, and yes, this even includes the secret and hidden ones, I only died either no times at all or 1 or 2 times. There was a boss halfway through the game and then one of the final bosses that I struggled with for quite a while. There is challenge to be found here, but again, I think it leans into the easier side of Souls-likes if we're looking at difficulty, which can be appealing to people that do enjoy these games, but don't necessarily enjoy insane levels of difficulty increase like so many of these games offer. And I didn't really find the game to be extra challenging on the additional news cycles that you can do once you finish the game, which is New Game Plus. While enemies are dishing out more damage and they have slightly more health, I am so kitted up at this point that I am just absolutely running through things. I have only done 1 additional new cycle, so I'm unsure if it continues to scale as you go through additional New Game Plus modes. Now, the actual level design of this game surprised me. One thing that I think is important for the Souls-like genre is to have an emphasis on exploration. The looping level design and interconnected levels. If it is a Souls-like, that isn't open world like Elden Ring. This is an aspect of Souls-likes coming from other studios outside of From Software that they don't seem to always get right, but again, because it seems like Sense Games really did their homework, I was taken back by just how much exploration, branching pathways, and interconnected level design is present here in AI Limit. There is hidden areas in this game, a few of them, along with hidden bosses that you can discover, completely optional paths that you would only find upon doing some exploration. This is fantastic. It encourages the player to want to explore every nook and cranny of the levels you're going through. Now, the devs did provide me with a pretty basic walkthrough guide to ensure that I could come across all content available in the game. This basically told me how to access the completely optional pathways of these areas and fight the hidden bosses. Now, some of these I found naturally. I decided not to look at this until I was a good portion through the game towards the end. But I can tell you that without this guide, I probably wouldn't have found this on my first playthrough of the game. Some of these hidden areas and paths are quite well hidden. There's even a slight bit of Souls platforming where you have to perfectly time your jump. There isn't a built-in jump mechanic, but there is the run and jump system just like Bloodborne. And this is integrated well into the level design. Some of the areas in the game also have an emphasis on vertical level design, which I always enjoy in Souls-like games. This is sort of the Souls-like platforming coming into play. There's even one specific area throughout this game that is like a pure inspiration cut from how the player accesses the Hunter's Workshop in Bloodborne within the world of Yharnam, dropping down this platform to perfectly land on platforms to access one specific door. If we're looking at the theme of the environments that you get to explore though throughout this game, they are a little bit bland. These are all areas and spaces that we've seen before in a lot of previous other video games. Code Vein is the one that rings home the absolute most. Some of the areas towards the end of the game are quite beautiful. Unfortunately, I can't show them. But most of the game revolves around bland sewer levels or post-apocalyptic city settings. My favorite area in this game would probably have to be the Poison Swamp. Yes, there is a poison swamp in this game. Like I said, Sense Games have done their homework. But this is only because this area is so different compared to most of the other areas throughout the game. It's also the most interesting to explore as well. And also real quick, if we're talking about From Software tropes, this game even has the frenzy status effect for all the frenzy status effect enjoyers from Bloodborne, so I know people are absolutely going to love this. I'm joking. No one likes frenzy, and the frenzy thing is basically here in this game. Now, while there is a main quest that you pursue as you make your way through the game, there are various NPCs that you can talk to engage in NPC quest line. These are completely optional, but they are recommended to do, just like a From Software game, as they do lead you to completely new optional areas and additional bosses to fight to get some of the best items in the game. I was also quite surprised as to how important some of these NPC quest lines are. One of them explains a lot to do with how things work within this universe and how certain things came to be. If I hadn't have engaged with that NPC, then I'd know significantly less about the game's lore compared to just following the main quest path. I really enjoyed this because it made finding each NPC and engaging in their quest lines worthwhile towards understanding what's going on within this universe. And just a quick tip, you should absolutely talk to this NPC, Delpha right here. His quest line revolves around strengthening your main restoration item to heal you. He'll ask you to retrieve these seeds that can be found out in the world. Some of these are hidden incredibly well. Upon returning these seeds, you'll increase the total amount of main healing items you can carry. And speaking of the main healing item, basically the Estus flask, there are these snails and butterflies that are hidden very well throughout the areas of the game, which upon defeating these things increases the amount of health that this healing item will restore. Now there are multiple endings in this game, 3 to be exact, and some of those NPC quest lines are required in order to access these. This does mean that in order to see everything that this game has to offer, you will need to do 3 playthroughs. Now this game took me 17 hours to finish, and that probably sounds quite short. And it is. If I have one complaint about this game is its length, because I was left just wanting more. But here's the important thing to know. AI Limit is not a AAA full-priced video game. This is actually AA, and it costs $30 US. So just considering that price and the amount of game that you get out of that, that's actually incredibly good value. There are some games that are full price that don't even hit the 15-hour mark. Yes, they look beautiful and they are very quality, but they still don't give you a lot of video game. Now, people aren't always looking for a lot of video game, especially if you've got so many other obligations in life. And generally, Souls-likes are quite long in length, 30 plus hours. Now, you could probably get over 30 hours of AI Limit if you do want to see absolutely everything with the multiple playthroughs. So considering all of that, that's incredibly good value for how much this game costs. Story-wise, the game is interesting. It doesn't really try to do anything overly too unique, though the lore is just interesting enough where I actually do want to read up on the notes that are left around in the environment, or talk to the NPCs and engage in all of their quest lines to understand what's going on here. The world has gone to poo-poo. There is this substance known as mud, and weird creatures known as the Necros are born from it. Most plant life has diminished, and the world is essentially left in ruins. The only last standing city with human population is Heavenswell. A religious faction known as the Church have been waging a war against the Necros for many years now. We play as Orisa, who is known as a blader. I don't want to give away too much, but bladers are their own things. She wakes up in the sewer system of Heavenswell with no recollection of who she is, what she is, or why she's here. Discovering all of this and what's going on in the world, what happened to the world, more about the bladers, the Church, and the Necros is genuinely some very interesting stuff. But again, I feel like we've seen parts of what the story has to offer before. Thematically, there are little bits of Nier Automata or Code Vein or even Stellar Blade all infused into the Souls-like package. I'll say this, the story is interesting enough where I would love to see a sequel, where Sense Games have a bigger budget to make an AI Limit 2. In conclusion, I highly recommend AI Limit, and the sad thing about this is I think this game is going to completely go under the radar. There is very minimal marketing for this game. I feel like unless someone has told you about this, you probably don't even know that this is a thing. What doesn't help is on the same day of release, another Souls-like that's coming from a well-established IP is also releasing. As a first step into the video games industry, I think that Sense Games have cooked up a really well-made Souls-like title. This is quite possibly the most From Software feeling Souls-like not coming from them, just because of those very ingrained From Software mechanics and features that have been replicated so closely to how From Soft would approach their games, on top of having a few unique flavors like the sync system or the nucleuses. And because of how well all of these systems have been replicated and come together, it's almost as if FromSoft had a small mini side project to make a bite-sized anime Souls-like. I feel like that's probably the best praise you can give a game like this. Well, we're at no shortage of video games right now. If you are looking for something new to play and you like this kind of thing, absolutely pick up AI Limit. It is insane value for money. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Slap that like button, it helps me out more than you know. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything going on here. As always, a big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I appreciate the support. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.